it is a symbol of not just where do you stand on this issue, but are you going to be independent? Do you have integrity? Are you going to fight? Are you going to be different? And it really does come back to that Ta-Nehisi Coates quote of, if you aren't willing to stand up against a genocide, how can we trust that you're going to stand up against Trump, stand up for democracy? And I think that is increasingly the sense among a large portion of the Democratic
I'm just
base.
skeptical.
Mayor Pete is in some hot water of late with progressives, people on the left, even just mainstream Democrats over some recent comments that he made about Israel. As Krystal Ball says here, this is becoming a dividing line for Democratic politicians. Krystal Ball and Saagar Enjeti broke all this down on their show Breaking Point, so we're going to see clips from Breaking Points as well as what Mayor Pete had to say about this subject. I'm going to share my thoughts on this as well. Let's get into it together.
We covered this last week, but just as a refresher, Pete Buttigieg went on Pod Save America. John Favreau was doing the questioning, and he just made an absolute mess of his answers on Israel. Said a lot of words, said absolutely nothing. It was pathetic. He got absolutely destroyed online, huge backlash to his comments. So just as a reminder, because we've got an update on this, just as a reminder of what he said, this was his response to, hey, do you think we should recognize a Palestinian state?
Do you think it's time to recognize a Palestinian state?
I think that's a profound question that arouses a lot of the biggest problems that have happened with Israel's survival, or Israel's right to survival in the diplomatic scene. And many of the people who have taken that step historically have done so for different reasons than what we see happening with European countries. I think we need to step back, and we need to do whatever it takes to ensure that there is a real two-state solution, and that no one, not even the likes of Netanyahu, can veto the international community's commitment to a two-state solution where you have Palestinians and Israelis living with safety, with security, with rights. I believe that can happen, but we have to actually show some commitment to it.
So again, the question was, should we recognize a Palestinian state? All of that long gobbledygook was the answer, which started off with, that's a profound question that arouses a lot of the biggest problems with regard to Israel's right to survival. Oh, thanks, Pete. Thanks. That was really useful. And all of his answers were like that. So it was so bad that he actually went to Politico to try to clean up the mess. We can put this up on the screen. This is an interesting article overall about what they describe as Dems' 2028 litmus test on Israel. And they say Buttigieg discovered that this was, they're so out of touch. It's crazy that he didn't realize this would be an issue. But in any case, here's part of what he said. He said, Democrats, like all Americans, but certainly Democrats, are sickened by what's happening and trying to hold several things in mind at the same time, all of which can be true. That what has to happen next is the killing has to end, he told Politico in an interview. The hostages have to come home. The people of Gaza need aid unimpeded, and all of that should be happening immediately. They describe that as a sharper response than in his interview. I don't know how sharp that is, but in any case, it goes on. He says of the criticism of his podcast interview, quote, I get it. It's important to be clear about something this enormous and this painful. It's just that it's so enormous and it's so painful, Saagar, that sometimes his words can fail. It's just that he feels it so deeply. He didn't express himself properly. Okay, but the next piece up on the screen, we got one more here. So Buttigieg sees a larger paradigm shift on the issue following the blowback this week to his response on the podcast. He's now trying to directly answer Democrats' questions about his positions on Israel. Asked whether a Palestinian state should be recognized, he told Politico a two-state solution has to come in the context of a credible and enforceable and negotiated process. I think if you just try to do it unilaterally, it's not going to change anything for people on the ground, and it'll just be words on a page. As for passing more decades-long military aid packages, Buttigieg said, we have to shift to a more case-by-case approach instead of a blanket approach. And he added, Netanyahu's military campaign is even more horrifying when you contemplate this is happening with U.S. support. So I don't know how great he did cleaning this up. It's still a lot, in my opinion, of gobbledygook that completely misses the moral clarity that Democrats certainly want to see from him. But Saagar, it was noteworthy that he felt the need to go in and play cleanup at all after, the answers that he gave, this classic like Pete McKinsey speak of let me restate the question and then bullshit around until you don't notice that I didn't answer your question at all. He would have gotten away with that just a few years ago.
No question.
And now people are like, no, we want an answer. Where do you stand? And the Democratic base is overwhelmingly of the view that this is a genocide, all weapons need to stop, there needs to be an end, and that this is horrifying, and there needs to be total and complete moral clarity when it comes to this issue.
I think what they
Before we get into what Sagar and Jetty had to say about this, I want to say I totally agree with what Krystal Ball is saying here. And this is the danger. I don't know that danger is the right word, but the kind of the problem with Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg is such an articulate and smart guy. It's great to have him go on like these bro podcasts, like when he went on with Andrew Schultz a couple of weeks ago. I did videos about that. He's really great in that kind of setting, getting the messaging across. But I think the problem with Mayor Pete is that he's pretty much an establishment Democrat. And there's no appetite right now for establishment Democrats. The Democratic voters, not just, if people want to say the loony left or whatever, but just mainstream Democrats are saying, we don't want to give any more money to Israel. Cut it off entirely. But Mayor Pete and these other establishment Democrats want to talk about, well, we got to give them defensive weapons, not offensive weapons. That's BS. Israel isn't going to go along with that. So we're at a point now where Democrats and a lot of Republicans are just saying, no more. We don't want to give any more money to them to continue doing what they're doing in Gaza. So as Krystal says, this is becoming a defining line for the Democratic Party, and you wonder how long the Democratic establishment can really hold out on this. I mean, I figure for a long time because they don't care about their base. But it's going to be really interesting to see what happens when we get close to 2028. I believe the Democrats are going to try to put up an establishment candidate like a Mayor Pete, who is going to be very supportive of Israel, and Democratic voters are going to say no, or I hope will say no.
Horseshoe on it will be eventually is, and this is why Buttigieg made the mistake of just like trying in the very beginning to give his gobbledygook answer, is going to be the eventual place that Slotkin ended up after our interview, which is they're going to stay silent. The ambitious ones will stay silent for now. I doubt they'll ever get to genocide. I think what they'll say is, I support no more weapons to the state of Israel. That is the like horseshoe between whatever is left of liberal Zionism and of the activist class, who is going to rejoice at seeing somebody like Gavin Newsom or others be like, yeah, we're not going to support. And realistically, that's what it's going to look like at an actual policy level. So in my opinion, what Buttigieg has shown is the political trepidation of even trying to square the circle by not just outright declaring several things at a concrete level: Palestinian statehood, offensive weapons, not even offensive, weapons to Israel. I think those will be the two actual litmus tests. And if I think about it in the Pod Save America clip, the one that went very viral was him saying, we're not going back to the pre-October 7th status quo.
Yeah.
That, I think, again, is another...
Pod Save, what was it?
That's what the Pod Save guys.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was John Favreau who said it. And who's the other one? I forget his name.
John Lovett.
Lovett. Yeah, Lovett. Yeah, they were all... But my point is that will be, I think, where the eventual nexus ends, where the activist class will be satisfied at a policy level. And in terms of the reality of like where this base and policy actually looks like, that's what it means. It means the special relationship is over. Offensive weapon or weapons, period, while your gangsterism continues, is not on the table. Us protecting you with the United Nations, not going to happen anymore. The anti-Semitism resolutions and the AIPAC stuff, it's like, no, think about it in the future. Can you win a Democratic primary at the presidential level if you appear recently on the AIPAC stage? I would say no. I don't think it's going to happen, especially and so looking at that politically and how that operationalizes, like J Street itself is going to be the only place where it's even remotely safe. AIPAC is done for it. And when we had Abdul Sayed here on the show, he kept calling it like a MAGA billionaire organization. And I was like, okay, man, like that is kind of true, but there's a lot of Democrats who support AIPAC as well. But that's the framing I saw where this is all going to end up.
Yeah. I personally think that the language of calling it a genocide is going to be important too, because it's a signal.
I don't think so.
I do, because it's a signal of that sense of moral clarity. And so, while of course the policy is the most important thing in terms of what you're going to do, that is the real litmus test of, do you get it? Like, are you willing to say the thing that is the most difficult to say right now? And for people who care a lot about this issue,
but that's
I will tell you that is
That's not the entire Democratic base. I mean, the No Kings protest is bigger than any other protest in the entire country. That's not about Gaza.
It's not the entire Democratic base, but I do think it is becoming increasingly central dividing line because it is a symbol of not just where do you stand on this issue, but are you going to be independent? Do you have integrity? Are you going to fight? Are you going to be different? And it really does come back to that Ta-Nehisi Coates quote of, if you aren't willing to stand up against a genocide, how can we trust that you're going to stand up against Trump, stand up for democracy? And I think that is increasingly the sense among a large portion of the Democratic
I'm just
base.
skeptical.
So I hope that Krystal Ball and Saagar Enjeti are right, that the next presidential candidate will not be somebody supporting Israel. I'm skeptical that they are correct, though, because I think the Democratic establishment, they're going to try to thread the needle just like Mayor Pete tried to do here, where it's going to be Israel's our friend and, we don't like what's happening and we're upset with Netanyahu. I heard somewhere else on another podcast, they were talking about the one true villain concept or something like that. I'm probably getting this incorrect, but basically, or one bad man concept where it was like, well, if we could just get rid of Netanyahu, then everything would be better. If we could just get rid of Donald Trump, then everything would be better, placing everything just on this one person instead of a system of multiple people. And the Democrats, it's going to be just like with Slotnick, who they were talking about here on Breaking Points, where she's going to try to thread the needle about offensive versus defensive weapons. And, they're our great ally and we get all this intel from them, blah, blah, blah. And the people are going to be saying, no, don't give them any more money. Don't give them any more weapons. And this is going to be a tough battle because you have so many of the Democrats taking this money from AIPAC and some that just believe strongly in Israel being our great ally, that I think it's going to be a lot like when they put the thumb on the scale to make sure that Bernie didn't get the nomination. But we'll see. Let me know what you think. Do you think that the Democratic establishment is actually going to move out of the way to allow a nominee for president of the Democratic Party who will say, hey, we're not giving any more money to Israel, no more weapons to Israel? I'd like it to be true, but I doubt that's going to happen. Let me know in the comments what you think. Do you agree with what Krystal Ball and Saagar Enjeti had to say about Mayor Pete? Make sure to give me a like and subscribe. I am Chris on Culture, and I will see you in the next video.